bring in Professor Dirk Kozte now to help us understand. I mean, there's going to be lots of surveys being done between now and election day. Prof, welcome to NewsLink. Thank you for your time. But I mean, when you hear about some of these numbers and how it's likely to play out, there should be no surprise, really, because the ANC's fortunes, election after election, have been declining. And, of course, the new kid on the block since 2013, different parts of the country, the EFF, has also been rising. And as Ray Hartley points out, the ANC is going to face a very tough race in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yes, that is indeed so. I think KwaZulu-Natal, but we've seen the signs already in the 2021 election, the local government election, where, for example, they didn't have a majority anymore in eThekwini, the Greater Durban metropolitan area. They have also the fact that in the 2019 election, they lost a lot of votes. So it's not a new trend. It's not a new tendency or new development. It's something that comes quite some time back, or it started already. I think one of the explanations which have not been presented yet is the fact that it's not anymore President Zuma who is the president of the ANC and the national president. That helped the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal tremendously, and it bolstered its support in that province. The fact that if we look at that within the ANC itself, the KwaZulu-Natal does not play a very prominent role. No one from the province is in the top 7. That was the case in the previous term, the previous 5 years of the ANC also. So I think there is a decline in general in the prominence of the ANC, of KwaZulu-Natal in the ANC, which is linked to the prominence or the role played by President Zuma as president. And now we see the problems that you refer to, governance problems, the problems with respect to the issues about the natural disasters, about the uprising that was there 2 years ago. So these, I think, all contribute to the fact. And then at the same time, a party like the IFP is also growing quite dramatically
yes.
in KwaZulu-Natal.
And in some parts...
Ironically...
yeah, sorry, Prof, yeah? Ironically?
Actually, after the term or the presence of Chief Buthelezi. So the new leadership of the IFP does definitely make an impact on the province also.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting to watch. And Gauteng is another province to look at. But out of this survey, I just want us to go national a little bit for now. I picked up a couple of slides and just to look at overall, because we're going to have this moonshot multi-party charter that's come together with parties like the DA and them. And some of those who were surveyed, according to the respondents here of this survey by Brenthurst Foundation, although they know very little yet about this multi-party charter, they believe that the DA's John Steenhuisen is best placed to lead it. But it's going to be a factor. I just want to bring up a slide just to show our viewers first. It's an overall slide which shows how many percentage, if they are thinking ahead to the next general election, which party would they vote for? When you look at the numbers there, the ANC in the next general election, according to this survey, could win 41% of the vote. The DA 23%, and the multi-party charter 36%. Remember, it includes the DA plus the others. I don't know how you interpret this percentage, this nice chunk percentage for the multi-party charter. How should we interpret this?
Well, I think we should interpret it as the sum total of the individual parties, because they are not going to compete in the election as the multi-party charter. We know that is an agreement, an alliance agreement that they've reached now already, about that they are willing to, and they have now established the foundation to cooperate as a coalition. But it's not, for example, like this so-called super PAC that has been or is being formed now of parties like the ATM and COPE and others that will will campaign in the election as a new entity, collectively speaking.
Yeah.
So I think one should not confuse the multi-party charter with the DA and IFP and Action S and others, because they are still going to compete in the elections in their own name, with their own identity.
So
it is only if you put all those percentages together, then you will see that second column, which is the multi-party charter.
yeah, and sitting at 36% overall. The next slide we can discuss very quickly is in a high turnout scenario. We know currently, I think we have about, the IEC tells us we have 26 million of registered voters in the country, and the youth number is plus minus 4 million, and people want them to vote. But if everybody turned out, or there was a high turnout of the votes, let's look at the next slide. What it shows us, in a high turnout scenario, the ANC will get 43%. The multi-party charter, the combined votes of those parties who are there, including the DA, Freedom Front Plus, the IFP, and the Action SA, will be 36%, and that's pretty close. But the ANC is still ahead, even in a high turnout, voter turnout.
Yes, high turnout actually in the past always favored the ANC, because the ANC always in the past had the problem of how to mobilize their own supporters. If you compare the voter turnout within each of the parties for the ANC compared to that of the DA, in the past there was a difference of about 10%, where the voter turnout of of DA supporters was around about 10% more than the turnout of ANC supporters. What we are seeing here is a little bit in the opposite direction, and that is that the ANC, remember we saw in the previous slide that it is 41%, the general predicted outcome, but in this one it is actually higher, and that is 43%. We will see in another slide that with the low turnout, it's even higher for the ANC, 45%.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it is something which is favoring the ANC, which goes in the opposite direction. I must also mention that this survey by Brenthurst indicated that about 80% of those that they interviewed are willing to vote almost immediately, which is an exceptionally high percentage. And therefore, I would say that these percentages, one has to qualify it a little bit.
Yes.
Because I think on the day of the election, the voter turnout will definitely be lower.
Yeah, let's look at the next slide. In fact, you've just mentioned it about in a low turnout scenario where the ANC's fortunes, according to the survey by Brenthurst Foundation, shoots up to 45%, which is a reverse of what you'd expect from what you said. And that multi-party is still sort of staying around the 30-something percentage point. I mean, effectively, if a vote was happening today, could these numbers be likely, Prof, in your assessment of this survey?
I think yes, but with this qualification of the high voter percentage, voter turnout, that is the basis of this survey. But if it is, let's say, somewhere in the 70%, which means that it is a little bit more qualified, it certainly looks like a realistic situation. Which means for the ANC, it actually varies between 33 and 35%. For the DA, sort of a percent, 2 or 3% higher. The EFF around about 17%, which I think is in some cases might be a little bit ambitious, but let's see about that. Because what is clear is that the losses of the ANC, those are the gains for the EFF now, which in the past was not the case. Remember, in the last two elections, both national, provincial on the one hand, and local government elections, the EFF stayed at 10%. So this will be quite a significant growth. And in terms of the survey, what we see is that that growth didn't happen over time, but it was sort of jumped to this position actually during the last year.
Yeah.
So there are certainly factors that contributed to the EFF support.
Yeah, there's still a lot to change, as you said. I mean, these are one of the first surveys we're looking at, and we're going to see more coming. And a lot still can happen in terms of allegiances and alliances and over the next few months. But very interestingly, finally, Prof, before I let you go, there's a slide I want to bring up which talks about the leaders, where we see the fortunes of Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa dropping over the last, since the last kind of of scenario was done. And this is the Cyril Ramaphosa still enjoying the highest positive favorability rating of politicians tested. This is just overall, and you've got all the leaders there of the various parties. It's Ramaphosa at 42%, followed by Malema 31%. Zille is still there, 24%. Mmusi Maimane at 21%. John Steenhuisen, interestingly, lower than Mmusi Maimane, then followed by Herman Mashaba, and so on. And you go to the end, including a newcomer there at the end. It's got a small percentage, Songezo Zibi. So what's your interpretation of this slide? What do we take out of this one?
Well, I think, first of all, the trend that started in 2018 already, and that's that President Ramaphosa is significantly more popular than the ANC. Secondly, that the popularity of the other leaders are not directly related to their parties. Take, for example, the second one, Julius Malema. His party is much more popular than his party also. The same applies to John Steenhuisen, less popular than his party, while someone like Helen Zille is there, who is more popular than her leader. So I think this is the focus on personalities that will play a very important role in next year's election. And the last number of elections, personalities, the leaders of political parties, have always played a very important role. But I think in this case, it is sort of a confirmation for President Ramaphosa that what he is doing is supported by many people who are not necessarily ANC supporters.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next few months. Thank you very much, Prof. Dirk Kozte, for your interpretation of this latest survey that we've picked up from the Brenthurst Foundation, showing a number of things at the national level, what people could be voting for next year. And provincially as well, you see some moves. ANC's support might decline in Gauteng, but the biggest danger, according to this survey for the ANC, is actually in KwaZulu-Natal, among others. But Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa still remains more favored by the electorate at this stage.